we have seen that a very famous mistake that always happens is sometimes that you go and talk with maybe one or two teams from your customer organization, maybe like the IT team, because definitely the IT team, technical people, they will really get all the benefits of the cloud and they will be excited about the cloud, right? And you tend to forget about the other organizations and the other stakeholders and decision makers that they are inside the customer organization. And that's why we have come with something nice called the Cloud Adoption Framework, or what we call the CAF, Cloud Adoption Framework. And with the Cloud Adoption Framework, what we're trying to do, we're trying to like organize or doing some categories inside the customer organization that we have these personalities, right? So we have the business, mainly the finance people. We have the people oriented, which are like the HR and the people managers, the governance, who is working across the board here, the platform, the mainly technical people and solution architects, the security, very clear, and the operations, the people running the organization or operating the organization, and the support teams, for example. So what we're trying to do in this cloud adoption framework, we have divided the capabilities into two families or two categories. We call the first one the business family, right, which are not very technical people, right? And then the second one, we called it the technical family, which are more of technical people here. And what we're trying to do one by one, let's see. So the most important thing, let me go back. The most important thing here is not to forget any of these perspectives, right? So don't only go and talk to the platform, to the security, and for example, you forget the finance people, the CFO and the business, for example. So this kind of framework, it's composed of 52 questions, like 6 or 7 questions to every personality to make sure that you get their buy-in on moving to the cloud. Are they ready to move into the cloud or not? So let's start with one by one. The business perspective is very simply, how do I or how do my IT align with the business needs? Very simply, who's this? It's the finance manager, right? The one responsible for the budget. How will my IT align with my business needs? So this is someone like the CFO, for example. People support the development of the organizational wide, right? So if I'm going to move into the cloud, that's a big change here. So how the people will react to this change, right? And people means someone like the HR, right? Staffing and the people managers. Something else, something like governance. So to focus on the high level skills and to process, to align the IT strategy with the business strategy here. And usually who's this? This is someone like the CIO, right? Who's touching both parameters here, the IT strategy and the business strategy. And then platform, technical people, right? Someone like the CTO, someone like the solution architect. Usually these are the first type of perspective we go and explain the cloud to. Security, right? Someone like the CISO, for example, the one responsible for the security. What kind of compliance parameters do you have? What kind of encryption mechanisms you need to apply, for example, in your policies? So you need to go and talk with the security perspective. And finally, the people who will run the operations, right? So again, from the CAF perspective, what we're trying to do with the CAF, very simply the message here is, with the CAF, we're trying to sit and talk with all of the stakeholders, not just one stakeholder, and you tend to forget about the other stakeholders. And that's why we have created something called the OBAM. What is the OBAM? Very simply, it's outcome-based account management, which means this is our philosophy in AWS on how we do business, on how we do account management. So let's see this one by one. So with the OBAM, or what we call outcome-based account management here. It's like multiple phases. And if you are into sales and if you are into account management, maybe you will find yourself doing this by nature, right? But with the OBAM, this is like a systematical method on how, with some steps, I can go and pitch the best out to my customer. So let's see. The first one here is what we call explore. An explore phase, this is even before meeting with your customer. Explore, this is before even meeting with your customer. So before meeting with your customer, you try to explore, which means you try to gather as much as information about this customer, about his organization, about his industry, maybe about his competition, how this customer is measuring success, what kind of risks, for example, he has inside his industry, right? And then once you gather this information, maybe you will have some assumptions, definitely will not gather 100%. So you go and you start engaging with your customer. You go and you start engaging with your customer. And let me tell you, from the surveys that we have seen, customers, they don't like generic presentations, which means this is what AWS can do in general. Customers, and especially the executives, they like something personalized to them, right? And that's why during the engage, now you have gathered some information about the organization of the customer, and you are coming with a specific message here. You are engaging with the customer in order to validate your assumptions based on the last phase in the explore. And once you have validated these assumptions, you go what we do, emphasize, or you dive deep. And this is where you go and sit with all of the stakeholders, like the CAF we explained in the last session, right? So you go and have meetings with every perspective here, and you understand the warning signs and the personal motives of each and every perspective, right? So this is now I'm diving deeper inside this customer organization, inside each and every stakeholder personal motive into moving into the cloud. And I can tell you, if you really did all of these actions here, you will be very, very well prepared to do what we call enable, which means now you propose your solution, right? You have done your homework of exploring the customer, you validated the assumptions, and then you went and had meetings with all of the stakeholders and you understood how this is running internally. Now you're very well prepared in order to go and propose something to your customer. So you might handle some customer objections. So let's see this one. Read it with me and tell me how can you respond back to something like this. So let's try the first one. A customer is telling you your solutions and expensive. So your solutions and services are too expensive. Definitely you have met customers like this. How do you respond back? How do you respond back? Take your time, maybe like a couple of minutes. Think about this. A customer is telling you your solutions and services are expensive, right? How can you respond back? From your experience, how do you respond back to something like this? I'll give you maybe 1 or 2 minutes if someone is writing something on the chat, or if you want to unmute yourself maybe and say it. If an objection is coming to you, someone is telling you your solutions and services are too expensive.
Is this related to a specific context of existing on-prem services, or is this regarding an existing service which is already on AWS?
So you are visiting a customer, right? He has an on-premise, okay? And you're trying to migrate him into AWS. And maybe you're giving him a budget of how this migration looks like, and he's telling you, yeah, but your solutions and services are too expensive.
Okay, so the context is that the solution is our proposal for the migration and then operations within AWS. This
Correct.
is
Exactly.
Okay. All right.
Correct. That's the context. Yes. Yeah. So I have some answers here. So convince the customer that this is a pay-as-you-go model and you will not need huge upfront investment. That's good. So you're telling him that the payment model here is different. Okay. I would try to understand where this belief is coming from. This is very, very good. So when you say it's too expensive, you're comparing with what? Right? And then Sudeep is saying customers will save cost of managing the data center. Of course. What are your current investments? So Tabatsu is saying maybe this customer is investing in something else. So Mr. Customer, can you let us know what are your current investments? Okay, I like that. Any more opinions? Any more opinions? If a customer has a certain objection, I'm telling you, sorry, but your solutions and services are too expensive. Right. Let me tell you something very important in general when you are handling a certain objection. All right. When you are handling a certain objection, because this is very, very key. When you are handling a certain objection, the most important thing is to empathize with the customer, right? And not just become defensive, right? The most important thing is for me to explain to the customer that, Mr. Customer, very simply, going into the cloud for sure you will have some cost savings, maybe 30% or 40% of cost savings, right? So I need to convey this message, but let me tell you a mistake. Maybe you have been through it before, that when the customer is telling you the solution is expensive, you just try to become very defensive and you just want to prove for the customer that he's wrong. And this is a very big mistake, right? So what do you need to do? I need, first of all, to understand and take it step by step. So I can tell the customer, okay, so Mr. Customer, I understand that cost saving is your primary focus. Is that correct? Right? So it's not like you're simply defending and saying that, no, 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 no. What you're saying is wrong. For sure, you're going to have some cost savings, and these are the reports that is showing this. It's the most important thing is not to prove him that he's wrong. The most important thing in an objection handling is to prove for him that why. So first of all, you take his side with his words, right? And you want to let him understand why we think that going into the cloud is more and more cost effective. So let's see. So you can tell him, Mr. Customer, I understand your main concern here is cost saving, right? And as AWS and for you as a partner, we can help you optimize cost by we have multiple options for pricing. We're going to see these options. And we can do what we call right sizing, because Mr. Customer, maybe you're saying that the solution is expensive because you're comparing apple to apple. Today you have 10 servers and you think moving into the cloud, I will just move with 10 servers. But that is not correct, because you have 10 servers right now, but you have done the sizing based on the peak. Going into the cloud, the model is completely different. I'm going to use just the average and I can scale out, right? And we're going to see something even more, that I can do something like reserved instances. So I can even save more and more from my payments. So do not become defensive, please. And just let's try to explain to the customer, Mr. Customer, maybe here you have done something wrong, or maybe you're not comparing correctly. So let's try to help you how you can compare this correctly. We can do multiple pricing options. We can do right sizing, because we know that your infrastructure on premises are underutilized. So it doesn't make sense at all when I move into the cloud to move with the same sizing. We can provide for you some automation and some management tools that can even help your team doing much, much faster and more stuff productivity here. We can also help you quantify the business value of your solution. Make this, like, for example, if I have 20% of more staff productivity, I can quantify this in a dollar sign. And I can tell him, you know what? You can have cost savings even on your stuff right now. And you will see the business impact in the staff productivity, in the operational resilience, right? Which means that compare your uptime of your on-premises versus compare the uptime in the cloud. Most of our customers, they have reported that when they are moving into the cloud, definitely they have a better uptime and a better reliability here. So can you see, I need to take this very important thing, not to become defensive, and try to explain it to the customer why definitely going into the cloud for sure will save him cost. And above to all of this, you can provide him the reports. You can let him read the reports or share the reports with him about Gartner reports and IDC reports of customers already moving into the cloud and having these kinds of cost savings when they went into the cloud. So it's not your own opinion, but it's the industry reports that is showing this. Is this clear? How can I respond to something like this? Something else. Your customer is telling you, you are the partner, I want to continue working with my AWS representative, right? I want to be working directly with AWS. I don't want to have a partner in the middle. How can I respond to something like this? We can simply tell him, all right, you will still have a direct relationship, right? You will still have this. For us as APN partners, we work very closely with the AWS sales team, right? And this is to build the plan for you. So we don't work on our own. We work with AWS to build for you the complete plan. And what we add as partners, and this is very important, if you remember, you are adding your unique experience. So you can tell him, and we can bring our industry knowledge. So you can tell him, for example, we have done this X number of times before, and we have these multiple customers who are now up and running and they are enjoying AWS services with our help and our support. Do you get this? And this is how you can respond to something like this. Something else very, very critical. A customer is telling you, okay, I don't need to have your support in the migration services. I will do the migration service on my own. And this is very critical. So you can tell him, all right, Mr. Customer, your expertise about your company is essential to successful cloud adoption, for sure. However, the cloud adoption journey contains many stages. It's not something straightforward, right? And we might have different migration methods and various stakeholders here. And we have done this migration before with X number of customers, right? So it's not something straightforward. Migration is not something straightforward, and you need to have it with people who have done it before. You don't want just someone who attended some AWS trainings to just go and do the migration, right? So you are giving this message to the customer without any disrespect to his team, that you can tell him a very bold answer, yeah, but your team has not done migration before, and definitely you have lost your case. Or you can tell him, yeah, we understand, we completely see that you want, for example, to save cost here by doing the migration yourself. But let me tell you that migration is not a straightforward job that you can do. And we have done this before, and we are bringing our experience to you in migrating X, Y, and Z customers before. So, Mr. Customer, we can really help you here, especially if you have the competency of migration. If you remember when I explained the competency program. So does this make sense to you, right? The objections and how you can respond back to these objections. Did you ever face customers like this, right? Having this kind of objections? I believe if you are a customer facing person, then definitely you have seen stuff like this. Customers can benefit from the partner migration program. So partner migration program, this is for the partner to help him understand how he can do migration. And later on, he will pass the competency of migration, right? So if a partner is migration competent, this is even giving the partner more credit to the customer. Mr. Customer, I have the migration competency. I have migrated other customers before. AWS certified me that I am a migration competency enabled. Did you get this? So this is how we can help our partner. Fine. Cloud economics, right? What is this? So if I'm doing a bit of pricing now, economics, I'm doing a bit of pricing now. So price comparison, what do I need to do? You need to choose first your initial workloads, and then you map the customer requirements into AWS services. Like if I told you, I need a virtual machine, this is EC2. I need database, this is RDS. I need object storage, this is S3. Did you get this? So you're mapping requirements into AWS services. And very important, you choose the right sized service. So for example, if I have on-premise a virtual machine with, for example, 8 CPU and 16 gig of RAM, when moving into the cloud, do I need to go with an EC2 instance exactly with the same parameters? No, absolutely not. Why? Because the VM that I have on premise, is it 100% utilized? No, we said that I do this based on the peak utilization, and that's why you will find in most of the cases, and this is a real number, sometimes the VM is 10% utilized. I have been inside data centers where the virtual machines I have is like 10 or 12 or 15% utilized because they are not getting all of the peak traffic coming to them. So now, when moving into the cloud, does it make sense I will move apple to apple? Definitely not the case. I can go with a much, much smaller EC2 instance. And then if I need more, I can scale out using ASG, right? So this is number 3. Choose the right sized service. Evaluate the pricing model. I'm going to explain it. We have options on pricing model, on demand, the reserved and saving plans. And then you can give your customer an estimation of the price using something called pricing calculator. We're going to see it. So at the beginning, when you are migrating into the cloud, as we mentioned, you will not find a customer who will migrate production traffic into the cloud from the first step, right? So I can migrate something like test and dev, it's not production, or I got some confidence, then I can do my backup and archiving on S3, object storage, and then I get more and more confidence. So now I can even make my complete disaster recovery that can be on the cloud, getting more and more confidence, and now I can start moving real data. And it can be something like big data analytics, for example, VMware or virtualized applications, or any kind of workloads like Windows workloads, Oracle workloads, or whatever. So what do you need to understand? I need to dive deep inside the customer application. I need to understand how the application look like. Virtual machines, what kind of operating system? Going into database, what kind of database engine? Going into the storage, what kind of storage do I have? Because after understanding how the application is working in the on-premise, I can go and map these requirements into AWS services. Remember, I can map it to compute, EC2 instance, to storage like S3, databases like RDS, network with a VPC, content with something like CloudFront, and security and identity with something like IAM, for example. So with the pricing now, and please pay attention, this is definitely a question in your exam and very, very important one here. What kind of pricing options do we have? The first one, and the easiest one, is what we call on-demand. And with on-demand, from the name, this means there is no commitment, right? There is no commitment between you and AWS. At any certain point of time, you power on an instance, you work with this instance, and then at the end, you pay for the time you used this instance. That's the on-demand. But for example, I have seen that in order for my application to run, I need, for example, let's say 3 EC2 instances. So I know these instances are going to run for at least few years, right? This is the minimum number of instances. So if I know that I'm going to have these instances up and running, this can never go down here. What I can do something called reserved. I will have a contract between me and AWS, and I will say, AWS, please, I want to reserve these instances, and you have options of either 1 year or 3 years. And please do not ask me the question why we don't have the option of 2 years, because it's only 1 year or 3 years. And if you did reserved instances, you can save up to 75%. And you see the big difference here. So I know for the minimum number of instances, I can go and I make them reserved instances, which means I can get 75% of savings. Did you get this? So this is another example of saving. Something else. With the reserved, it means that if you choose an instance type, you cannot change it. It's not very flexible, all right? So if you want your plan to be flexible, you can go for what we call savings plan. So the saving plan means you are committing a certain amount of dollars per month, and that's why here you can spend it any way you like on the compute instances, right? So here, reserved means I will keep this EC2 instance with these parameters. What if you want to change the parameters? It's not flexible. And that's why the second one is a saving plan. And with the saving plan, it's a bit flexible more than the reserved, but here you can get up to 72% of a maximum discount. With this one, you can get up to 72% of a maximum discount. And then the number 3 or number 4, it's called spot instances. What is spot instances? Remember when we explained the AWS infrastructure, we mentioned that we have hundreds of servers that we have inside every availability zones and inside every region. So we definitely have an excessive number of resources that are not used. And in AWS, we want to utilize all of our resources. And that's why we have made another option called the spot. So for example, if the demand price is $1 per hour, the spot can be, for example, $0.2 per hour. But this price is not fixed, which means this price is depending on the supply and demand. So as long as I don't have much of demand on spot instances, this is like you are bidding. So if the price is right now $0.2, you can say, okay, I'm going to bid 0.25. As long as the price I am bidding higher than the current price, you are keeping your EC2 instance. But what will happen if more users are coming and using these resources? This price now can increase. And if the price increased more than the price that you have bid, this means that you have 2 minutes to save your work, and then AWS will take this instance from you. But the benefit of the spot instance that you can get up to 90% of discount. But please pay attention. I don't say I cannot, you should not use the spot instances for production traffic. Why? Because this one, at any certain point of time, if the price increased, I might lose this instance. So spot instances is extremely good if you're testing something, which is very good if I'm testing something. Spot instances can be very good for workloads that they can be interrupted, right? What we call stateless workloads. But if you need instances that I cannot interrupt it, then you go for something like on demand, right? So this is the spot instance. And finally, with number 4 or number 5, dedicated. Dedicated means I will dedicate this server completely for this customer. I am not going to share this server with any other customer. And you might need to do this if you have a certain compliance, for example, that you don't want to share anything over with other customer on the specific server, for example. And that's dedicated. And that's why this one definitely is the highest one in the cost. Because the concept of cloud in general is you're sharing the infrastructure. If you have certain compliance where you need to have dedicated servers just for you, not to be shared between you and any other customer, you can go for dedicated definitely, but this is the most expensive solution. But this can help me in something like BYOL. Have you heard about this before? Bring your own licenses. If you already purchased licenses and you want to move these licenses to the cloud, you need to be bounded to the physical server parameters, right? And that's why you can go for something like this, because you are saving from the other side. You purchased the license and you want to keep what you purchased and you want to save it. All right? So these are the pricing options. Are they clear? This is a very, very important term and concept in AWS. I can tell you will have questions about this in any exam that you will take with AWS. What are the pricing models and options that we have for our EC2 instances? Is this clear, everyone? Is it crystal clear? Any question about this part? This is a very important part. Any question? Maybe one more minute if someone is typing a question. All clear. Thank you, Radu. Anyone else? Any question about the pricing options? Okay, thank you for your clarification. So AWS pricing principles here. So as we mentioned, I replace the CapEx, bulky investments, with low OpEx or low variable expenses. You pay per use and you pay as you go. And the services definitely, they are priced independently, whether you're using EC2 instance or storage or database. And if you are using more storage, for example, you get better discounts, what we call volume pricing discounts. The more storage, for example, you are using, the higher level of discounts that you are getting. And you can save extra with what? With reserved instances. Remember the reserved instances? 1 year or 3 year contract with AWS, and you can save up to 75% of savings. I'm just revising. All right, now let's say you migrated your infrastructure into AWS and you want to make sure that your instances are utilized in the best way. There is a service called Compute Optimizer. And you'll find this one is very nice. Compute Optimizer, this is a service that will run through your running EC2 instances, and it will check the EC2 instances utilization reported in CloudWatch. And then based on your utilization, it will tell you how can I optimize my AWS compute. Optimize means what? How can you change the sizes in order for you to get lower cost and lower bill for EC2? Can you get this? So we are having a specific service that can scan across your EC2 instances in order to tell you and consult you how you can get a lower bill for your EC2 instance. If you changed these parameters, for example, then you might get lower consumption per month. And this is called Compute Optimizer. Sorry. Another service called Pricing Calculator. You might be sitting with one of your customers telling him about the benefits of EC2 or about RDS, and he will tell you, you know what, I really like what you're telling me, but can you tell me a rough estimate about the pricing? What can be the rough estimate about the price of if I will run EC2 instances, or if I will run, for example, RDS instead of my databases? So you can go to this pricing calculator, you put multiple options here about the calculator, and then at the end it will tell you this is your yearly estimate and this is your monthly estimate here. So very, very nice. So customers can get from the high level, these are the kind of savings if I went into AWS. And this is called the pricing calculator. All right. So let's take this quick knowledge check. Which options show AWS pricing principles? Remember, just in the previous slide, we spoke about what? We spoke about pay as you go. We spoke about volume pricing discounts, especially for the storage. Did we speak about something called pay more? Pay more the more that you use? Of course, you will not pay more. You should pay less, right? And then we spoke about also the reserved instances. So this one definitely should not be in the answers. And with this, we come to the end of module number 3. So in module number 3, we're talking about the APN partners now and how a partner can help the customer organizations in order to do the cloud adoption. The cloud adoption is a journey, and it's a common migration path that customers will take. Customers might have concerns, and we have seen some techniques on how we can handle these kind of concerns. And we have seen this CAF, Cloud Adoption Framework, if you remember, which means do not forget and do not just go and talk with one entity inside the customer organization, right? Make sure that you talk to all the stakeholders and decision makers inside the customer organization. And in the CAF, we spoke about 6 perspectives, if you remember. And then we spoke about the OBAM, where I have 4 phases, where I explore and then I engage, and then I dive deep into the customer, and finally I enable, which means proposing solutions to the customer challenges and customer problems that he told me about. And then for pricing, we spoke about multiple options here that can really affect the final customer bill. So we spoke about the pricing principles. We spoke that I can have something called pay as you go, something called volume pricing discounts, something called reserved instances, either with 1 year or 3 years, but these are not very flexible. So if you need something more flexible, then you go to the savings plan, right? I'm just revising what we explained. All right, so this is the end of module number 3. We start a bit from module number 4, and then we take our second break. So in module number 4, we're going to go through some of the AWS core services, apply the services to my client use cases. So we're going to see something like a use case here, explain how to position AWS services and solutions to the clients. How can I explain this to the client? And use the objection handling techniques that we saw in the previous model here. Identify the pricing tools, like the pricing calculator, for example, in order to give my customer a certain budget. So for the journey, here in this case, we're going to see, we spoke about these core services, if you remember, about the compute, storage, database, security, and network and content delivery. So how do I show cost savings to customers? First of all, what do I need to do? First of all, in order for me to propose any solution to the customer, I need to understand what? I need to understand the customer requirements. In order to propose a solution, I need to understand his requirements. And then once I understand his requirements, remember, I need to map these requirements into the services that now I know about. And once I know about these services, remember, I can do right sizing. Do you remember what was the right sizing? If I have a certain instance on-prem, I don't need to migrate it using exactly the same parameters. I can maybe even use half of the parameters that I have, and I can do scaling out using something like ASG. And then evaluate the pricing models that you have. If I know that this is the minimum number of instances that I have, then I can go for something like reserved instances, because I know that this will save me extra 75% if I did this, for example, on the span of 3 years. And then I can, after doing this, I can do a rough calculation with my pricing calculator here, and at the end, I can deliver the estimates here to my client. Mr. Customer, this is what you're paying right now versus this is what you will be paying if you have AWS. So let's explain one by one in details. In order for me to gather the requirements, what do I need to do? I need to sit with the customer, right? And I need to, something very important. Listen, I know this is something very hard, right? Usually you are trying to position and you have a high level in your mind. This is usually what we propose to most of the customers, but this is not correct. So what you need to do here, I need to sit with my customer, and something very important, I need to ask the customer what we call open-ended questions. Like, for example, if I tell him, Mr. Customer, do you have any challenges? So either he will say yes or no, right? But if you can tell him a question like, Mr. Customer, can you tell me about what kind of challenges do you have in your environment? This is an example of an open-ended question. So in this case, the customer will try to speak up about what he has, about the challenges, because maybe when he will speak about like challenges that he has, you can figure out about extra services that you can propose him that can solve a second problem maybe that the customer has. So once the customer is explaining his internal design, for example, so you document his requirements, right? You classify if this is possible as a multi-phased. You will not do it all from one phase. You will migrate application by application. In this example, in this specific example, the customer is going for SharePoint and Active Directory. So these are the first phases that he will go to. And if you remember, this customer already purchased licenses. So can he utilize the same Microsoft licenses that he purchased on AWS? Yes, and that's the concept of what we call BYOL, or bring your own licensing. So you assess the capacity and the licenses that he has right now, and you try to set up a meeting with the solution architecture and the technical team now. So after understanding the customer requirements, now you attended multiple AWS trainings now, so you are the expert on how you can map these requirements into what? Into AWS services, right? So I can take this kind of requirements and I understand these are, in this specific case, they are Microsoft workloads. So I'm going to do this kind of migration based on 3 phases. So phase 1, phase 2, and then phase 3. It depends on the complexity. So usually we try to migrate the less complex first, right? So phase 1, phase 2, and then phase 3. And then again, I sit again with my customer in order to confirm his requirements. So Mr. Customer, this is what we had, right? And this is confirming the requirements that you mentioned, and this is the plan, the 3 phases plan based on what you told me. And then you start examining the solution, right? You examine the solution and the services. You already mapped the requirements to AWS services. You did the right sizing. You evaluate pricing options, because you can tell the customer, if I went for reserved instances, you will save 75%, right? So we'll tell you, wow, this is very good. So let's try to opt for this kind of discount. And you calculate the average price, and you finally deliver the estimate. And something that can really help you here, we have some predefined workloads. So for example, if you're going for something like SharePoint, we have done SharePoints like hundreds of thousands of times before on AWS, and we have a best practice, a deployment guide, can you see, on how, Mr. Customer, you can deploy SharePoint on AWS. So you can go and examine this, and it will tell you, for example, this is the solution architecture. From our previous experience of migrating SharePoint from on-premises to the cloud, this is most likely how the solution will look like. So let me highlight some parameters here. This is my VPC. And inside the VPC, as you can see, I have two availability zones, remember? I don't want to configure in one availability zone because if this one failed, I have a single point of failure. So as per this design, I have two availability zones, and we have what we call a three-tier architecture. Web, which is the front end, application, and finally you have your database or the back end that you have here. And this case, the customer, he wants to have Microsoft SQL. So I can leverage something like RDS with Microsoft SQL here in this case, right? So what I will do, I will have two availability zones, right? I will have a VPC and I will have my load balancers. So when customers are coming to me, I'm load balancing across multiple EC2 instances that I have. And then you evaluate the solution, like the services that you are using. Is the solution fault tolerant? Remember, I need to have it reliable. Yes, because it's part of two availability zones. What kind of database is used? In this case, Microsoft SQL, for example. Is traffic load balanced? Yes, because we have our load balancers. Where is the content and data stored? And can I leverage something like CloudFront for static content, for example? And how will we address licensing? Did this customer purchase before Microsoft, or he's doing this from scratch? Can you see these are the kind of questions that can help me? And then based on what I saw on AWS, based on the SharePoint I can do on AWS, I understand, okay, I need EC2 instances. This is for my compute. Based on the best practice on the SharePoint on AWS, I need S3 for the object storage. Based on the best practice, I need definitely my VPC, which is like my virtual isolated part inside AWS. And I will also need CloudFormation. Do you remember what was CloudFormation? Do you remember this? In order for me to build my solution, will I build it manually? Or maybe there is already a CloudFormation template that is ready for me to use, 100%, Razvan, exactly. Infrastructure as a code. So maybe I already have this as a template, so you can simply take it and you can configure it. What about the users who will configure this infrastructure, right? Remember the IAM? I'm just revising, having multiple user roles, and every role has multiple policy and privilege. So server administrator, for example, database administrator, or operations who cannot do writing or modification. They can only read and check the configuration that you have. Did you get this? So these are the kind of examples that we can have here. So if the customer is doing something that is a best practice, go back to the AWS and check the best practice about running a SharePoint, for example, on the cloud. And then step number 3, I need to do right sizing of my infrastructure. So again, I sit with my customer and I check maybe his utilization that he has on premises, so I can decide how can I do this kind of right sizing. And you have the options here. So for example, M4 large, so it's 8 gig and 2 CPU, or there is something called X large, 16 gig and 4 CPU, or there is something called 2X large, 32 gig and 8 CPU. Can you see? We have different options here, and you simply choose. And if you want to get a flavor about the price, you check what we call the pricing calculator. So if this is my EC2 instance, what will be my average cost or average monthly and yearly cost? So this is the average cost here. This is my yearly cost, and this is my monthly cost that I'll be paying if I use, for example, this kind of service. So after building all of this, you deliver the estimates, right? So you have a call or you meet the customer and you tell him, you know what, based on what we explained and based on the best practices that we have mapped the solution and this is the estimate that you can pay, right? And hopefully the customer will see the big cost saving that he will get. And something very important is what? Is a POC. Very, very, very important. I have seen less number of customers, maybe I can say less than 10%, who will go to the cloud before doing a POC. Very, very unlikely that a customer will migrate to the cloud before seeing a real POC on the cloud. And you're going to see some funding programs that sometimes we can fund up to 100% of the POC credit. As AWS, sometimes we can fund up to 100% of the credit here. Right? So the POC as well can be something that can prove something against the objection handling. So if a customer has an objection about AWS, doing for him a POC can be something very successful, because now he is seeing not only some slides, he is seeing what we're trying to get. So maybe the customer said, okay, I like what I'm saying, but I need to have a POC. I need to try my own data and my own application on the cloud. So you agree on the POC, you have the POC, and then finally you check if the POC is successful, and the customer will gather all of his technical team to make sure that, yes, we are getting from the POC what should be expected here, and everyone is saying, yes, 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 this has delivered what we were expecting from the POC, and finally you close your opportunity here, right? So this is very simply systematically how I can engage and work with my customer here. So in module number 4, what we explored so far? We explored how to position AWS products and services, right? We spoke about AWS use cases, remember, for the SharePoint. This customer had SharePoint, so I went on the AWS website and I found that, yes, there is a best practice on how can I deploy SharePoint on the AWS website. There is even a cloud formation template that I can use for this customer. And then how to price it using the pricing calculator here, and how you can send this one, and how you can do objection handling techniques. And maybe one of them can be what? Maybe one of them can be doing a POC. POC can be an example of handling techniques and handling objection techniques. And this can be also a question in your exam. All right. So with this, I guess you definitely deserve a break. And I can tell you have been doing fantastic so far. I know we talk about lots of information, but you have been doing fantastic so far. And remaining for us just one final module here, which is module number 5. We're going to see here the go-to-market strategy and how we can help you as our AWS partners in order to do more and more business and open other opportunities on your behalf. All right, so let's go for a 15 minutes break. And please, if you have any question, please, you can ask your questions now on the chat or unmute yourself. I hope this kind of silence means that you don't have a question, and I hope that things are clear. If you have a question, you can write it on the chat. If you don't want to write the question publicly, you can just write it to me. Please, the most important thing that you get the best out of this training. All right, so let's pause for 15 minutes break, and then we come to continue the last module for the training for today.